Hey there, it's been a while. I couldn't record or upload as I recently moved, but now I'm settled, so let's get into it. This time, I'm playing Pokémon Whubbish White. If you don't know what this game is, I don't really blame you. I haven't found much content on this game, but I was scrolling around online and I managed to come across it. This game is similar to Pokémon Emerald Trashlock, where many of the good Pokémon throughout the game have been changed, like the starters. There also have been a lot of move buffs, and nerfs, as well as many Pokemon evolutions that have been entirely removed or changed. Changed how, you ask? Well, Lillipup, for example, one of the earlier game Pokemon, has had their entire evolution line changed completely. Instead of evolving at level 16 and 32, it now evolves at level 35 into Herdier, and then at level 99 into Stoutland. There are many Pokemon in this game where their evolution line has changed the level requirements. I don't know what madness the creator was on, but this challenge just became a whole lot more difficult. Plus, there are even move PP changes, but I'll refer to that later on. With that being said, let's start our Pokemon Whubbish White adventure. Part 1. A new start. As we start our adventure, we have the choice of choosing our starter, and you guessed it, the starters have changed. They've changed to the Elemental Monkeys, which are a previous gift encounter from the Dream Yard. Now we have the choice of Pansear, Panpour, or Pansage. I decided to go with Pansear because I figured there'd be a lack of fire types in the game, and having one this early on would be pretty important. After beating Bianca and Sherrod, we name our starter, obtain the Pokedex, and officially start our adventure. Our first encounter on Route 1 ended up being a Cleffa. As for the rules of this Nuzlocke run, I'm doing things a bit different. Any Pokemon that faints must be boxed, nickname all Pokemon caught. I will be using healing items, but not always. The healing items I use depend on the trainer. For example, during the E4, the trainers have a few potions, and I allow myself the opportunity to use the same amount of healing items they can. And last, of course, is one encounter per route. On Route 2, I caught a Sentret, and just south of Strighton City, I took on Bianca, and once I reached Strighton City, I took on Sharon. Now, due to certain changes in this game, there are no longer the Gift Elemental Monkey Pokemon in the Dream Yard, so that's one less encounter we have before the gym. Part 2. Testing the waters. Planning for this gym is quite strange, as normally the gym leader has the opposite Elemental Monkey, who spams a Work Up, until either it will KO or sweep my team. But in this game, Work Up move PP has been nerfed. The Pokemon can only use this move twice. Fight, we're facing Cress. I start off with Pansear, using Leer to drop the defense on Lillipup, and Lillipup uses one of the two workups. We trade blows back and forth, but eventually Pansear manages to Fury Swipe his way out for the KO. Panpour comes out next. I pivot immediately to Cleffa for the incoming water gun. Cleffa was able to get Panpour to about 60% before I decided to switch into Sentret, but eventually it was taken down. I switched to Pansear, but I got KO'd before getting off a move. Cleffa was the only survivor on the team after the first gym. The odds are not in my favor. Part 3. How far can we climb? After the gym, I was eager to go and get my next encounter, in the Dream Yard, which just so happened to be a why not. After that, I had my next rival fight against Sharon, which we handled with little to no issues, and caught a Purrloin as our next encounter on Route 3. In the Wellspring Cave, we caught a Surskit. Another change in this game has been that certain areas are split into two parts. The Pinwheel Forest, for example, there is now Inner Pinwheel Forest and Outer Pinwheel Forest. Outer Pinwheel Forest, our encounter is a Lillipup. With my limited encounters thus far into this run, I ran into a totally optional trainer at the time, which I didn't know would be so troublesome, which was preschooler Juliet, and her Cottony and Petalil. They would be somehow the bane to my existence. None of my Pokemon were prepared for this fight, and the blight they would bring, with the amount of sleep powders and Mega Drains that would be used. This was the end of our very first attempt. Part 4. Retribution. We start again by selecting Pansear, battling our rival and heading to Route 1 to catch our next encounter, which happened to be a Kricketot. And on Route 2, we caught a male Combi. We breezed through the gym puzzles, taking out the other trainers, and were ready to face Cress once more. This time I was a bit more tactical with move usage, and we were able to win with no deaths. After that, I caught Solosis as my Dream Yard encounter, beat Sharon once again, and caught Seedot on Route 3. I then helped Sharon against Team Plasma in the Wellspring Cave, and caught a Minccino as my encounter. I hightailed to Nacrene City, and went straight to the outer Pinwheel Forest for my encounter, which happened to be a Meowth. Part 5. Is this for real? Before entering the gym, we have to take on N, but it wasn't a difficult task given our team. Solving the gym riddles weren't any problems, and taking out each trainer in the gym didn't prove to be difficult. The fight against a Lenora is typically a run killer, so I had to really try my best to prep. Solosis needed to boost our physical defense, then I would pivot to Minccino, who would beat Herdier. Watchog was the real threat, but it easily knocked out our Solosis, Seedot, Panseer, Kricketot, and Minccino, thus ending our second attempt. Part 6. Third time's the charm. Well, this time I chose Panpour because I figured I would choose each starter at least once. We beat Bianca and Sharon, head to Route 1, catch a Skitty as our encounter, then make our way to Route 2, catching a Whismur along the way. In Strighton City, we're ready to face off this time against Silent, which wasn't a problem for my team, and then I headed to Dream Yard once again to get my encounter, which was once again a Solosis. In Wellspring Cave, I caught a Paras, and on Route 3, I caught a Shroomish. Once in the outer Pinwheel Forest, I managed to catch a Lillipup. Before facing the gym, I faced off against N, once again, and I was ready to challenge the Nacrene City gym. Navigating through the gym wasn't any problem, but the real challenge once again was Lenora and the Watchog. As the match started, I figured we could Leech Seed Herdier, then paralyze it before pivoting to Lillipup, who would then aid in knocking out Herdier with a bite and a Leech Seed damage. Watchog would come in, we'd pivot to Skitty, taking a Retaliate, then use Fake Out to regain some momentum. We pivot to Shroomish, who takes some damage and gets put to sleep, but our Chesto Berry is used, and Shroomish is able to get a Stun Spore off. Before we switch into Solosis, we use Charm, and then switch to Whismur, who uses Uproar, getting critical hit, enabling Lenore to use a potion, and another Uproar for the KO, netting us our second gym badge and our Retribution. Part 7. We climb. After that, the story takes us to Inner Pinwheel Forest, where we get a Slackoth. One thing I forgot to mention was in the documentation, there are a few gift Pokemon available, like this Magikarp and Feebas. Unfortunately, both of them don't evolve until level 99, so I'm not really planning on using them. After that, we completed some story progression and made our move onwards. We arrived at Castelia City, completing some other story progression stuff before making preparations for the gym. Our new encounter actually happened to be in Castelia City, which is another gift encounter, a Houndour. Upon getting this gift encounter, I added it to my team and proceeded to enter the gym, taking on all the trainers. Berg wasn't really a threat, as my team was able to handle his fairly easily, netting us our third gym badge. Part 8. How far can we go? We head north to be briefly stopped by Bianca and Sharon. There weren't any issues with them. On Route 4, I caught a Machop, and in the Desert Resort, I caught a Stunky. Once in Nambasa, I picked up the HM for Strength and caught a Snover on Route 16, which is very elite later on. Before taking on the gym, we had the Ferris wheel date with N before he challenged us to a match, which we also had no issues with. Part 9. Halfway there. In Nambasa Gym, the trainers weren't too difficult to manage, and we were able to handle them with ease. Starting off the gym battle, Snover just had to spam Ice Shard with the Hail Up in order to knock with the first Emolga. Substrika would come in next, and we need to pivot to a pre-poison Machop, who I thought could tank a hit, but I unfortunately miscalculated. I then pivot to Slackoth, who takes the Volt Switch, and then I pivot to Houndour, who unfortunately perishes. I bring in Delcatty to fake out the Zebstrika and nails a crit, and a double stop the next turn seals its fate. I back in to handle the last Emolga, almost getting knocked out, but managing to live on 3 HP. So far, one casualty in this run is still pretty good. Part 10. Flame On. On Route 5, we took on Sharon again, which we didn't have any real issues with, and we competed in a double battle, which was also uneventful. The main things on this route was our encounter, which was a Trubbish. Typically, on the Driftfield Drawbridge, Ducklet is the main encounter, but the creator decided that Dunsparce would be the only encounter. Once in Driftfield, I headed immediately to the cold storage, dealt with Team Plasma, while I was also picking up the Never Melt Ice item. Then I caught my encounter, which was a Spheal, and on Route 6, I caught a Hoot Hoot. Unfortunately, I did end up losing some of the footage for the trainer battles in the gym, so I was only able to salvage the battle against Clay. So that's all I can be able to show you, sorry. For Croc Rock, I brought a Snover to set up with Hail and deal as much damage before pivoting to Panpour to deal the final blow. Excadrill comes in, and I switch to Machop, which also activates its Flame Orb. Wait, how did you get a Flame Orb? Okay, so I use a PK Hex editor to put my Pokemon 1 XP lower than the level cap, also known as edging. I also enable the use of one specific item, the Flame Orb, which is a useful item that helps boost Machop's attack power. I don't know if it's cheating, but to be honest, I don't really care. Sorry, not sorry. Anyways, with that being said, Clay just kept using Cone Claws on Excadrill, allowing the Guts boosted Machop to knock it out. Last but not least, Palpitoad comes in, but Machop was able to handle it and tank a few muddy water hits before dealing the final blow. Part 11. Up, and away. Heading to Route 6, we ran into Bianca and battled her again. There weren't any issues, and we were gifted the HM for Fly. I had to take a detour and travel back to Nacrene City in order to get the Mystic Water item. In Chargestone Cave, I caught a Dratini as my encounter. Towards the end of Chargestone Cave, I ran into N, and he challenged us once again, and we were able to handle it with no problem. Just north of Mistralton City, I caught a Darumaka as our encounter. In the Celestial Tower, I caught a Litwick and found Skyla at the top. Once in the gym, we took on all the trainers, and we were ready to take on Skyla. I have Herdier use Crunch until it gets the KO on Swoobat. In comes on Pheasant. I pivot this Spheal, who takes a quick attack, and then I use Encore to chop on Pheasant in Razor Wind. I use Aurora Beam until Spheal was low, then I pivot to Litwick while Skyla heals. We use Will-O-Wisp and Flame Burst to get the KO. Swanna comes in, and I turn to Dratini, but it isn't enough. I then had to bring in Litwick to try and burn Swanna, and pivot to Loudred to tank a few hits, before I pivot back to Litwick just in time for the burn to knock out Swanna, netting us our 6th gym badge. Part 12. No room for error. After the gym, we hit to Twist Mountain, took on Sharon once again. The next part of this game is very crucial, as I can't really have any room for error, or I have to wipe the entire run. While in Twist Mountain, I caught a Sandile as my encounter, and once I got to Icarus City, I caught a Buizel. Just north, the outer Dragon Spiral Tower, I caught a Mienfoo. Navigating through the gym puzzles and taking on each trainer was really no trouble. As the battle against Bryson starts, I have Darumaka use Fire Punch until it knocks out the Vanillish. Beartic comes in, and I Flare Blitz for the Oko. Cragnole is the last Pokemon, but you guessed it, I tried hitting it and got flinched. So then I pivoted Mienfoo and Drain Punch, netting us our second to last gym badge. At the Moor of Icarus, I caught an Elekid. At the inner part of the Dragon Spiral Tower now, I caught an Axew with the ability of Mold Breaker. In Relic Castle, I chose the Plume Fossil, which I would restore Part 13 into the endgame. After that, I headed to the Nacrene City Museum, restore the Plume Fossil, and then I headed to Route 8, encountering Bianca. The battle was pretty straightforward. After that, we headed straight to Upalucid City Gym, which was a Dragon-type gym, which is one of my favorite Pokemon typing. I spent some time trying to theory craft about how I would take on this gym. As for the trainers, I was able to get through them with little to no issues. And for the final gym battle, I started off by poisoning the Fracture and setting up Toxic Spikes for later in this battle. I would then pivot to Archon to tank a Dragon Tail, and then I would have to then pivot to Bayleaf, who sets up Reflect and Light Screen. I eventually switched to Snover, who sets up Hail upon switching, and we Ice Shard to deal enough damage, and the poison takes out Fracture. Druddigan comes in next, and we use Blizzard for the Oko. Haxorus is the last Pokemon, but it switches in and it is automatically poisoned thanks to the toxic spikes from earlier. I switch in Shroomish, who gets hit to red, so I decide to sack it for a momentum switch. All the whiles, the poison is still affecting Haxorus. I bring in Machoke, who uses Vital Throw, dealing a lot of damage after taking the poison. Machoke gets hit with a slash, and then we use Vital Throw once more for the knockout. 8 badges, complete. Part 14, nearing the summit. As we finish our business in Opelucid City, we head north and encountered a Kecleon. After that, we encountered Sharon for our last battle. We did have quite a bit of trouble during this fight, but we were able to handle it with our team, and we came out with no deaths. In my path leading up to Victory Road, I caught a Tropius as my encounter, and when I arrived at Victory Road, I encountered a Stantler. After trekking through all of Victory Road, I finally arrived at the Pokemon League. Part 15, Chantal. For Chantal, we start things off with Fracture using Taunt. This prevents Cofferegus from using Will-O-Wisp. After that, we use Shadow Claw for about a third damage, and Cofferegus uses Shadow Ball, which drops our special defense. Another Shadow Claw and Shadow Ball puts both Mons pretty low. Knowing that the AI will heal, I double down for another Shadow Claw, dealing about half before pivoting to Mienfoo, who comes and takes in a Shadow Ball. I then U-turn out to Kecleon, who finished things off with a critical Shadow Sneak. Kohler comes out next, and I switch to Tropius to take a Brick Break. I then pivot to Krokorok, who tanks a Shadow Punch and retaliates with a one-hit KO Foul Play. Jelson comes out next, and with a Moxie boost from the turn before, a single crunch was able to knock it out. Last but not least, the Chandelure. With their Moxie boost and crunch disabled, our Calcs decide that Earthquake is the best move, netting us an Oko. Part 16, Grimsley. Tropius opens things up for us with a Fly, while Scrafty uses Sand Attack. We connect, dealing about half, and then we end up taking a Poison Jab. An Aerial Ace knocks out the Scrafty next turn, and Liepard comes in next. I immediately switch to Mienfoo, who takes the incoming Fake Out. Aerial Ace puts us in yellow, and we use Drain Punch for the one-hit KO and some HP regained. Bisharp comes out next, and I decide to stick it with Mienfoo and use Drain Punch, which actually ended up being another Oko. Crocodile comes in last. We tank an EQ, and I U-turn into Tropius, who gets hit with a Foul Play, and then uses a Magical Leaf to knock Crocodile into red. We both heal and trade Foul Plays and Magical Leaps, ending in our favor. Part 17, Caitlyn. We start things off with Elekid, who uses Electro Ball, tanking as Psychic. We Volt Switch and bring in Krokorok for the incoming Thunder. We then use Crunch for the KO. Our calcs show that Croc won't survive an Ice Beam from Sigilif, so we have to immediately switch to Kecleon, who takes the Ice Punch. Kecleon takes a Psychic before using Thunderbolt. Knowing that Sigilif is faster, we use Sucker Punch for the KO. Musharna comes out next, and we switch to Krokorok for the incoming Shadow Ball. We spam Crunch repeatedly through the heals, and a Foul Play finishes things off. Gothitelle comes out last, and with the Moxie boost from the prior turn, we were just able to finish this battle with no casualties. Part 18, Marshall. For the Marshall fight, I decided that we can play a bit more risky. We start things off with an Elekid using Thunderbolt, and getting hit with an Eviolite resisted Bulldoze to about half. We use Volt Switch to bring in Tropius safely against the incoming Bulldoze. Since we outspeed, one Aerial Ace was enough to finish things. Sock comes out next, and we use Fly. Sock uses Stone Edge, but misses. It then tries again for another Stone Edge, but it misses again. We connect on the Fly, knocking Sock into sturdy range. Knowing Marshall will heal, we use Fly once again, putting Sock into sturdy range. Another heal from Marshall, and another Fly from us. Knocks Sock once again into low HP. Sock goes for the Karate Chop, and we finish things off with an Aerial Ace. Conkeldurr is next, and we use Fly, once again dodging yet another Stone Edge. We connect on the Fly, dealing it to about 50%. Conkeldurr finally hits a Stone Edge, putting us very low, and an Aerial Ace next turn knocks out the Conkeldurr. Mienshao is the last Pokemon, and I decide to sack Kecleon in order to burn some of the power points on Mienshao. Kecleon gets hit with a crit Rock Slide to very low HP. Luckily, Kecleon's Quick Claw pops and allows us to use Salary Beam for a critical hit. A flying jump kick was the last that Kecleon saw before perishing. I bring in Elekid since it outspeeds Mienshao, and we use Thunderbolt, avenging our fallen comrade. Part 19. The Cost of Winning. I made a beeline to the top of the champion fight, but N had beaten me to it already. At this point, I'm able to leave N's castle and be able to change my team, so I did so. I started by leaving and using PK Hex to put in max battle points so I can get some items. And if you say that's cheating, I don't really care. I needed to use them, and I'm going to use it. Since we take on Ghetsis right after N, with only a mandatory heal in between, I have to try and not sack too many Pokemon during the N fight. As we reach the top, we're forced to battle and catch Reshiram. But since we aren't really allowed to use legendary Pokemon according to the rules, I don't add it to my party. A change I made to the rules is that I'm allowing the same amount of healing items the opponent has. For example, N may use 4 potions, therefore I can use 4 potions. For the N fight, we start things off with Krokorok tanking a Fusion Flare, living on 1 HP. Krokorok uses EQ, also knocking Reshiram very low. Both N and I go for a potion. Reshiram goes for another Fusion Flare, and I another EQ. We both use potions again. Then Reshiram goes for a Hyper Beam, and I decide to invest another potion. Reshiram uses another Hyper Beam, and we go for a Dig for a KO. Vanillix comes out next, and I switch to Elekid, who takes an incoming Blizzard, dealing about half. We Volt Switch to bring in Machoke, who dodges the next Blizzard and activates the Flame Orb. Vanillix decides to set up Hail, and we use Brick Break for the KO. Klinklang comes out next, and a simple Brick Break knocks it out. We get hit with a Flamethrower before getting off a fly. I decide to pivot to Fracture, who takes the incoming Flamethrower, and a Night Slash drops us into yellow, and a Dragon Claw was the deciding blow. Archeops comes out next, and unfortunately, Fracture perishes to a Dragon Claw. I bring in Elekid and use Thunderbolt, dropping Archeops to low HP. A Stone Edge brings us to 17 HP, and a Volt Switch finishes off Archeops. I bring Machoke out against the Caracosta to use Brick Break, which drops it very low, and it uses Waterfall, and the burn damage puts Machoke very low. I decide to switch into Tropius for the incoming Aqua Jet. I use another potion to make sure we live another move, and then we use Magical Leaf for the KO. For the Ghetsis fight, we start off things with Krokorok using Taunt, expecting the incoming Toxic. A Crunch drops Cofferegus to yellow, and a Shadow Ball does about 1/5 to us. Another Crunch finishes things, and Hydreigon comes out next. I make the decision to bring in Fracture. But hey, that isn't allowed, since it already died. And to that I say, yes it did, and that is exactly why it's just gonna die here again. With that, I bring in Elekid, who uses Thunderbolt, dealing some damage, and tanks a Dragon Pulse. Another Dragon Pulse puts us in very low HP, so I decide to Volt Switch out, luckily avoiding another Dragon Pulse and bringing in Snover. I protect first turn for the incoming Fire Blast, and I forgot about my Choice Scarf, so I actually had to pivot to Machoke, who takes the Fire Blast, Burn, and Hail damage. I'm forced to invest a potion here. Another Dragon Pulse, Burn, and Hail damage puts us low. Both Mons are healed. Hydreigon uses another Dragon Pulse, and we use Brick Break, putting in very low HP, and the Hail knocked it out. Bouffalant comes out next and uses EQ, and we use another potion, and then Brick Break for the Yoko. Electros comes out next, and I switch to Krokorok to catch the incoming Wild Charge. A Crunch puts it at 10 HP, and a Flamethrower knocks out Krokorok. I bring in Elekid to outspeed and knock out the Electros. The Hail knocks out Elekid, and we bring in Snover, who uses Blizzard, against the Seismitoad, who sets up the Rain Dance. Unfortunately, another Blizzard just knocks it out. Bisharp is the last Pokemon, so I decided to deal as much damage as possible before sacking Snover. I bring in Tropius, who uses Aerialise, but takes more damage from Stone Edge. I decide that it's also time to heal Machoke in the back. We dodge a Stone Edge and bring in Machoke, who takes the incoming Stone Edge, Hail, and Night Slash before landing a Brick Break, winning us this challenge. I had a lot of fun playing this. I really want to start doing more streams instead of recording them only, so I'm going to start doing streams on Twitch. It should be in the description down below. Please like, subscribe, and follow for more. See ya.